Next, we hear from Dr. Stephen Ward, professor and director of the George S. Turnbull Center, the Portland base of the University of Oregon School of Journalism and Communication. Previously, he was the first James E. Burgess Professor of Journalism Ethics and founder of the Center for Journalism Ethics at the School of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He also has been director of the Graduate School of Journalism at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, Canada, and is the founding chair of the Ethics Advisory Committee of the Canadian Association of Journalists. Dr. Ward is the author of many books and articles on journalism ethics and serves on many editorial and advisory boards for ethics organizations and for journals on media ethics and science. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you again. It's an honor to come here to speak before you. I'm going to do very quickly, tell you where journalism ethics came from and the model that it was based on an old media environment that no longer or partially exists. I'm going to tell you the new environment and how that has created complete turmoil in my field of journalism ethics. And finally, I'll try to indicate implications for science journalism hype and so on. First of all, you can be fairly precise in where journalism ethics comes from, at least in the United States. I would say 1921, 1922, with the development of a code of ethics by the now called Society of Professional Journalists. I present that as the beginning of professional ethics because it was explicit, that is, it was written down, it was collaborative and agreed to by many journalists across the field. And for that reason, we have, of course, ethics in journalism goes back to the 17th century, but we have a movement towards a professional model. I'm going to skip that and this is the model that we ended up with. It comes from the creation of a mass commercial press and the power that press gained in the early 1900s. Eventually, the press became a virtual monopoly on information for the public and advertising for the public, stuck between what the public was passive and dependent upon the media and what was happening in the world. The really good question is, why at this point in time would journalists start to create professional organizations and codes of ethics? The answer was severe doubt, skepticism, public criticism of those mediators, the priestly class of journalists between the world and the public. At this point in time, everyone is concerned about the commercial model of the press. We still are today, press barons and so on. In response, what was created were these codes of ethics in almost every state in the land, and nationally and elsewhere in Canada and so on. It was a very professional ethics, and the familiar properties and principles, I'm sure, are new to you. If you're going to be in the middle between the public and the world, you better be impartial, you better be objective, you better be independent, editorially independent, and conflicts of interest, hopefully avoid it. You better minimize harm, and you better be accountable. And you can find those in almost any code of ethics today. Now, what's happened, of course, on all of that is that the new model, meaning a chaotic, expanding universe of media, simply means that the professional press and this code of ethics, this approach to journalism, is diminished, questioned, and so on. I can't tell you how different it is to teach journalism ethics today, or even to do journalism and talk about journalism or science communication. Perhaps in the old day, if you're a very bad teacher, you would take the 4 principles of the Code of Professional Journalists, have the students understand the principles, take some cases and say, well, here's how you apply the principles. You can't do that. Every principle will be challenged by your students in that class, including objectivity, obviously, including impartiality, including independence. And so and at the same time, we have citizens who are practicing journalism who don't come from a professional background at all. Not that that's necessarily required, I might add in there. There's 2 macro trends. We have a mixed news media, mixed in the sense of who practices it. We have amateurs, citizens, professionals, and whatever. Mixed in the sense of types of journalism styles and formats, as you all know, bloggers, social media, so on. But the other aspect where I won't touch on today is that it's also global, with global implications. So these trends that are, that have come along have left us, what is the impact? It means the model that we conceived of journalism and its ethics in the past is under severe scrutiny because the role of the journalist in that media sphere has changed. We have obviously issues of identity. Who is a journalist, right? We have new forms of journalism who practice different forms of journalism, and the new practices mean new values. If I'm going to live blog a court session, I never had a chance to do that as a journalist. I'm not sure I want to either. The values of accuracy and speed and verification all come into play here. How do they operate in a situation like that? New values and old values, of course. Most of the new media online is much more is more partial, is more partisan, so impartiality is questioned. And yes, where's journalism ethics going? Let me give you some actual concrete examples of work that I'm involved in that will tell you just how somewhat confusing this whole field is. I'm looking down at my time here. Let's take the Venerable Society of Professional Journalism, journalists, who wanted to change it to Society of Professional Journalism because, or get rid of the word professional recently because they weren't sure that would do. But they're looking at developing a new code of ethics, revising their code of ethics. And I'm on one of the committees that's doing this. But the problem is that there's complete disagreement, not complete disagreement, but extensive disagreement between the people who are doing the code writing and the people who are doing the journalism. Some want to go back in time, sort of let's just stay with the old principles that we have. Others think that a complete revolution in principles has to come into being. To the point, for example, where one recent book on journalism ethics questioned the very need for a principle of independence, of editorial independence, or at least certainly not the way it was understood. Because many, many people write online and forms of journalism who don't work for professional organizations which enforce conflicts of interest and independent guidelines. It doesn't apply, according to this view. Let me give you another example. I'm also helping the online news a newsroom association or news workers association develop their codes also. Listen to this approach. There's so much dissension among journalists out there that the people who are leading this charge do not believe that there's any sort of universal content you can put into the code and tell everybody to abide by. There's too much disagreement on that. So what are we going to do? We're going to be procedural. We're going to tell people how to think about the issues and develop their own codes. So each association can develop their own codes using our so-called building blocks, the tools. So it's things like think about this, think about that, consider this, consider that. But staying away from any sort of specific universal content in the code, right? That's how much things have changed in this particular field. There is, of course, types of journalism that I would just want to point out. There's now things called something called brand journalism. Brand journalism is where corporations get around, skirt the mainstream media, have their own websites, and do journalism articles on their own websites. Could be Red Bull, could be Cisco Systems, could be anything, right? They hire journalists to work for them. There are some editorial restraints like don't trash the owner, and don't trash the corporation you're writing for, and don't highlight the competition. Editorial reservations that I would never live with as a journalist, but when I was a journalist, but it's part of this brand journalism. Is this independence? Is it any worse than independence, in other parts of the media? Or consider another type of journalism that's going on. Agenda-driven journalism is best as I can call it right now. One example is there's quite a few right-wing groups who are using money, libertarian groups, and I'm not using that pejoratively, who are setting up websites at state houses around this nation to report on issues from a perspective of small government, lower taxes, and so on. A deliberate political perspective, but they claim they're objective, they're impartial, and they're independent because they report the facts like everyone else. So the whole issue of what is independence in this era is really up for grabs. And, I have my own views on that, but I'm just trying to show you the problem. I think with respect, in the little time I have left, I think what science has to do, and I'm willing to sort of give you a few more comments about what I think science can do later because I'm running out of time, is first of all, the communicators have to reimagine what science journalism can be in this completely new environment. We're never going to, and I'm not sure I want to, control science journalism and what the people get in terms of information. What we need to be is a counterbalancing force, a sort of coalition of the sane and the rational, I'm being facetious, a coalition of groups within science, mainstream, online, NGOs, whatever, where we develop a system of writers and informers who at least can provide some segment of the population a place to go where it is reasonably reliable, reasonably participatory, reasonably engaged, and so on and so forth. I can say more about that. In terms of hype, as far as I'm concerned, hype is even more today, and it is certainly not going away. It is an intrinsic part of the public sphere that I've just described. So we have to do something about that. And in 47 seconds, I think first we need a very rigorous calling out of people who do exaggerate and hype, and that means certain institutional media structures, I think. I think we also need media literacy so that the public themselves can detect bogus, phony, baloney. And we teach it across the disciplines of our universities, not just in journalism schools. And also we develop new media spaces that are reliable, that are not hyping, are non-hypable. And that's, I think, it's not everything. The hype will still continue. But I think it's better than what we've got now. So hopefully that gives you some idea of the scope of the ethical issues that we're dealing with today. Thank you.
No, thank you.